Okay, we still have some people who are joining us, but I would like to get started. I do appreciate everybody coming in tonight for our meeting. Basically tonight, I'd like to do an overview of where we stand as a program, how we're going to handle the reopen of baseball in our Northampton and Lehigh counties, and then actually when we're going to get started. I am certainly happy to announce that we do have dates that I will give out to everybody on when we will get started, much sooner than I think we initially had planned for. I did find out today that Ripken baseball in Maryland is opening on Saturday. So a lot of the tournament venues themselves are reopening, if not already, very shortly. I was on a call yesterday, and it does look like our counties will be in the green phase by next Friday. So baseball tournaments are going to be able to be held on June 27th and 28th in Pennsylvania, if that remains than what they're looking at right now, which is also very good news. And Diamond Nation announced that they will be opening July 6th along with the rest of the state of New Jersey. So initially, it looked like they were going to be open a little bit before that. I did get word today that they are going to reopen on the same date that the entire state will be running baseball tournaments, which is July 6th. So I think that's where we kind of start, is being able to now have a plan here in place of when events are going to be run, and be able to kind of, take a step back and see what policies that we want to put into place as a program, and then move forward with getting the kids on the field. So the first part about this plan is it's basically four prongs, I would say, that we're trying to touch base on, as you see on the screen. The first one is for us to remain safe. Secondly is to be respectful of others. I do think, and speaking with many of you, I think we now have, almost 75 parents on this call. I have probably heard between 30 and 40 parents on their feelings on this reopen and where we should be or should not be. And to be honest, it seems like everybody's in a different place. So, I just ask that we are respectful of others, and we'll get into the plan. But, some people might, wish that we had already been playing. Others may be a little bit fearful of us even playing. So I think, this is, different for everybody. Everybody's in a different situation. So I do ask that as we continue through this plan and we really get the kids on the field, that we do keep that at the forefront. Thirdly is for us to remain healthy. And I think that's one of the parts that, for me anyways, I feel a lot of these, other programs may be missing, is it's not so much that, we're not putting these plans in just to be safe. That's certainly the main priority. But really the second priority is so that we can remain healthy, so that we can continue throughout this entire season and play and not have any speed bumps or road bumps or anything in the way of keeping us on the field. And then finally is to remain competitive. I'll be honest, I have talked to a large amount of programs, and we'll touch base on where we are as a program, but a lot of programs are dropping some of their bigger events and just trying to do, just local stuff or, some various events that might, not keep them as competitive as they can be. And to be honest with you, my goal is that we do remain competitive. I do think that there is a value in us to go through this process in a safe way and being respectful. But to me, you can never take away that competitive nature in players or in a team. So, I really don't want to just run away and say we're not going to have a season. I do think we can, and under the, the guidances that we're allowed to, if we just practice the right habits and do the right things, I think we can kind of hit all four of these facts. So the first part on this presentation is kind of our mission behind this COVID-19 and where our program stands. So a lot of this PowerPoint presentation will be sent out to everybody. We will also have a formal document, it's 3 pages in length, that has every one of these, all of this information, I should say, documented, and then in bullet points, divided up so that you guys will all have that. The way that this is going to work is after the presentation, you will all be emailed this final document that we have. Before anybody hits the field, we do have a waiver form that does say, I've went through either the presentation or I watched the video. I do have a physical copy that was emailed electronically to me. I understand the recommendations and guidelines that the program is putting out. And I do understand that baseball and the Rising Stars are voluntary, and we're excited to get back on the field. So that will be, nobody certainly doesn't need to take notes or anything. All of this will be documented very easily, available on our website as well as through email. I'll be honest, I've had 5 other programs reach out to me and ask me to send them what we're doing because, they weren't even really considering a plan to begin with. So I do ask that everybody does take in consideration the amount of time and effort it took to, and research, I will say, to make sure that we have a really good plan in place. And again, with the 4 IDs of being safe, remaining healthy, being respectful, and certainly being competitive once we get started. First, I would obviously like to just point out, and I think everybody at this point has heard of, this kind of tagline of coronavirus, but, we need to understand that as people, and not just for baseball, but to be following the recommendations of the CDC and our state and local governments. And it's the only thing that we can do at this point to make sure that we are giving the players a chance to play, but also in the safest manner that we possibly can. And of course, we have this document and we have this presentation, but as anything, with this situation that we're in, it certainly remains fluid and is ever changing. So this document, I would hope in the next couple of weeks, especially when we're in this green phase, may be able to be updated with things that we can and can't do. So, all I ask is that as we go through this, that we do stay current, with what our local guidelines are allowing us to do. The other part of this is, and I understand that, we have a large amount of people in our program from Lehigh and Northampton counties, which is certainly, a very big portion of our program. At the same point, we have over 100 players in our program representing 31 different counties. So as much as I know individually we may be looking at our county and seeing what our county is doing, we have people who are living in counties that are currently in the green or currently in the yellow or in states that are, open. I think we just have to understand that, this is, for me anyways, I'm not a doctor. I've never gone through a pandemic, nor did I ever plan to. So the ideas that we're following is the best to our knowledge of being able to go through what people are saying, while also, making sure that we're just not sitting around and not getting ourselves prepared for when this reopen does happen, which, does look like the very near future. So obviously the CDC is one of the websites and one of the resources I've been, using. All of their stuff is going to be, on all of their recommendations, I should say, is going to be at the forefront of all of our plans. I would say these links are live. So when I send the presentation out, I would just ask that, we do spend some time on understanding how we can protect ourselves and others. And, if you are sick, what you can do. Certainly the guidelines in our program and this document do not supersede, going to the doctor or anything like that. For me, we're trying to find a way to get the kids to be able to play baseball, keeping our coaches safe and the players safe. And in reality, that's all we can do as a program. So making sure those health measures are, at the forefront really does mean that the CDC and knowing what, guidelines they're putting out is important to us, and hopefully is certainly being read and understood by our parents. Just want to put some resources on here on how I built this plan out. We will go through specific things and guidelines and recommendations that we felt were necessary when we are, running events, when we're, whether that's a camp, whether that's a practice, or attending tournaments. At the same point, I really do think that some of the information that has been outlined for us really needs to be, read and understood. So these were 3 resources that I used. First, the state of Pennsylvania put a guidance for all of sports. Essentially, it was their policies and procedures that is current to today. Again, with this forever changing model of, the fluid coronavirus, I would say, the goal is that continues to change with some of those, regulations and recommendations, being taken away, as slowly, but as quickly as possible. Second was the CDC actually did come out with their own considerations for youth sports. I took a lot from their recommendations and considerations because, to me, I thought that it was very relevant with specific to just youth sports and organizations so that, again, we can continue to play. I think a lot of this, I had a bunch of parents ask me, are you doing a presentation so that if somebody gets it, you don't get sued? I think, besides for the legal aspect of this, I think the bigger aspect that we're really trying to focus on is, yes, we want to get on the field, and yes, we want to do it in a safe way, but also we want to remain on the field. Like, I don't want to start the program in 2 weeks and, or 3 weeks or, next week. And next thing you know, we have to take, all the kids off the field because we now have half the program has coronavirus. So a lot of this is, a follow through and our job, along with the parents and the players and our coaches, to really put these policies and procedures in motion so that it is a long-term plan and not just something in the short term that, eventually ends up us not being on the field. Finally, the Play Sports Coalition was basically started right when COVID-19 really came to the forefront. They put a plan in place. I've been on countless webinars with some of these groups as well as others. League Apps has been very good with webinars. If anybody knows Slack, I'm in a Slack group with other baseball programs. They're sharing WAIVER forms, they're sharing guidelines. I'll be honest, a lot of us, I think, are in a situation where we've certainly never foreseen anything like this, or, when we start youth sports, we don't plan for anything like this. But at the same point, I think a lot of people working together to really just make, a safe place and an exciting place for sports, to reopen and begin. So all of these, again, are 3 live links. So when you get the presentation or you see it, you're more than willing to click on these links, see these websites, see their recommendations. I would certainly hope that, as we are getting closer to getting on the field, that we are doing some research on our own to making sure that we're staying safe. So the way that the rest of this presentation is set up is between 3 basic ways: program essentials, 4 ways, I'm sorry: program essentials, camp essentials, which we'll talk about, practice essentials, and then tournament essentials, meaning the things that we will focus on at various times using, the model of the program as the #1 goal. So these are things that are going to be in place. I'm going to go through each one. Some we'll spend a little bit more time on than others. All players, parents, and coaches and administrators must adhere to the guidelines from the CDC, state, and local authorities. This is a lot of, in this presentation, you'll hear should, or, we recommend. I will say the first one on here needs to be a must, where, if the CDC or state or local guidelines are saying we physically can't do something, we're not going to do something. And if we are allowed to do something, though, and we're doing it in the right guidelines, we will follow those guidelines, but we will be able to open up, sooner than we actually thought. So, I do ask that, when you take anything in consideration as we move forward, please make sure that we are following these guidelines. Some are laid out, very easily in this document. Some, everybody has heard on symptoms and everything like that. Clearly, I would hope that, we're all on the same page, that, yes, we're a go, but at the same point, we're going to do it in the right way. So the second one is the Rising Stars Baseball Program will provide a documented copy of our recommendations and guidelines on our website. It also may be updated, as I said earlier. So my goal is to make this as easy and accessible for all of you. So if there's a question on, hey, we're going to practice, just want to make sure we're doing everything in the correct manner, this is going to be very easily accessible. It'll be hopefully forever changing, meaning, in a month from now or a week from now, there are some updates that we can do. Certainly, that doesn't mean that, in 2 months from now, our guidelines may become even harsher if, numbers are going up very quickly. So I do ask that we do remain in a way of being communicated at all times here. And it's not just something that's going to go away because we did a presentation or we got a physical document. It's something that's going to be updated, and things that are going to be, we got to stay up with the times of exactly where we're at with the coronavirus. Thirdly is any team personnel, including players, parents, administration, that show any symptoms or signs as listed in the above link from the CDC or in contact with an infected person must stay home. Again, as I said earlier, some of these are should, some of these we recommend. This is a must. It's not something that, was just made up for me. This is something that, to me, baseball is different than it has been in the past. And sports really at this point are different. But this is one that, to me, obviously, if you're around people, we will need to come up with a plan with you, speaking with medical doctors about that. But this is a must. This is, clear as day, black and white. All players must have a mask available at all times. We will follow specific tournament rules that may require a mask to be worn. At this point, we do not have specific rules from any tournaments yet. If anybody's been following travel baseball in the state of Delaware, you will see some various rules that you may have never seen before. If you go to Sports at the Beach right now to play in a baseball tournament, you cannot take a lead. You cannot steal a base. The umpires are in a different position than they always have been. So each state is coming up with various rules that may require different things. So to me, just like if you have a black jersey and a white jersey and you don't know what to wear, put both jerseys in your bag. It's the same thing with a mask. At this point, we're not 100% sure what every tournament's going to say. Some may recommend or say you must wear a mask when you're in the dugout. When you're on the field, you do not have to. That's fine. We're going to follow whatever, regulations are put in. But to me, this should never be a problem of, I forgot this. This is as important in our program for the extreme near future and probably throughout that we do have masks on us and for each kid. I have extra masks that I'm giving to our coaches in the case that, somebody does forget one and we need them. Again, I don't think that this is a difficult thing to grasp. I'm not saying you have to wear it at all times. I'm not saying if you're in center field, taking infield, outfield at one of our practices in 3 weeks or 2 weeks, that you have to wear a mask. Not what we're saying. What we are saying, though, is there could be times where this is a mandatory thing. And if that is the case, you need to make sure that we have them. The last thing I want is somebody to show up to an event and, rather than us worrying about, batting orders and our coaches can't be worrying about who has a mask and who doesn't. One of the, hot topics around COVID-19 is obviously adults 65 years and older, and people of any age or of serious underlying medical conditions are strongly encouraged not to attend events. That's not me just saying, don't come to our tournaments. Truthfully, if somebody is, in one of these serious situations, and we need somebody to pick that player up for a ride to eliminate, somebody, a grandparent or somebody else having to bring them, I would hope that we can all work this together. If this is a situation that really is hard for somebody where, grandparents are necessary to drive players, or somebody who does have, a serious health issue, is someone who needs to be attending an event because of rides or because of something else. All I ask is that you let us know. As a program, I think, and really as a team, I think we can come up with a certain solution that may be able to help everyone, rather than just put somebody at risk because we didn't have the conversation. So, all I would ask is I'd rather have the conversation first, rather than something severe happen that, foreseeably could have been changed if we just had that conversation. Obviously, we're going to limit, team huddles to maintain the social distancing. Not all times are we going to be able just to say, everybody's 6 feet away when you're walking to an event or when you're in an event or you got to talk to your team. if we really do have to get into that tight-knit routine, everybody's close, we may require a mask to be worn, especially early rather than, as we get on and we get, some more of these regulations taken off. So again, masks are required to be on with us. But I would just say, we will do our best, especially early on, as we get this feeling out process of returning back to baseball, is to make sure that we're not, just, shoulder to shoulder, small huddles. We don't need anybody. I know our 12U team, they love to gather before the game and do their little thing. At this point, I would say we're going to really limit that stuff early on. Let's get us through, the July, August months to really get moving here. And then as we get closer to the fall, maybe some of these restrictions are coming off and we see where we're at. Some other program essentials that are part of this, no sharing equipment unless specifically necessary. Somebody breaks a bat in the middle of the game, we're not going to take you out of the game and say you can't play. At the same point, though, we want it that the coach is aware of anything, exchanging hands back and forth. And I think, it just makes, it doesn't hurt anything just to make sure that we are marking our equipment. If I show up and, I have the Cat 8 and 7 other players on my team have the exact same bat, it's very easy to be confused and who's grabbing what, and this bat's going in and out of different bags. I don't think it's very difficult. Throw a red sticker on the knob of your bat, we know it's mine. Green sticker, put a name, whatever it may be. I know that, I'm not saying you have to write your name big on your glove or anything like that. All I'm saying is let's take this in consideration as we move forward. Helmets, I do have a brand new helmet decal for every player. So helmets may look, they're from the Juan brand, if anybody has ever heard of them. They're behind like Vanderbilt in Tennessee. It's a big college baseball thing, but they're 3D helmet decals. So everybody will get a helmet decal that looks the same, and I ordered 150 of them. So, if you have your helmet and it's a black helmet with this logo or a white helmet, we might have 6 or 7 of the same ones per team. So, I would ask that, somehow you mark that, again, if it's a inside, write your name somewhere, but let's just make sure that, and let's not assume that somebody doesn't have what I have, rather than let's just take precaution and somehow mark that so we know what you have. Outside food, unless medically necessary, will not be permitted at a program-sanctioned event until further notice. Obviously, we have players in our program who may need, one of these things. They may need some food on them. I'm not telling you, if we're in between games, you're not allowed to go to a concession stand. What I'm saying is, if it's a Rising Stars event and we're at practice, rather than, calling dad and bringing food and all this stuff, you were there for practice, we're there for camp, we're there for a game. Let's eliminate any outside stuff that, potentially gives us a chance, whether it's to be shared or whether it's anything. Let's just eliminate it. We don't need it. We're there to get a job done. Hopefully that's practice or, game, and then we'll leave. Obviously, this includes sunflower seeds and gum. This is something that I'm having a call with our coaches, and this is something that's, again, not hey, don't have sunflower seeds when you're at Diamond Nation, because they have turf and everybody ends up having sunflower seeds and spitting them on the field. This is it's a situation where we don't need kids spitting or, opening their mouths for no reason, potentially being somehow that we could certainly promote, disease or, COVID-19 at this point. So the goal would be limit stuff that would do that. Players are certainly asked to bring their own drinks in a bottle identified with your name on it. I don't think, again, this is not difficult. Bring a water bottle, throw the name on it. If it's one that disposes, make sure you throw it away. I don't think that, that should be too hard. If it's something that, you bring from home, I just ask that you put your name on it. We're really going to make sure that kids are not, taking drinks and throwing them on the ground. Everybody's going to have a designated area where to put their stuff. Obviously, we're going to have a pre-screening evaluation that we're sending out. Nothing that needs to be handed in. All it's going to say is, hey, before you come to one of our events, to keep everybody safe around us, here's a couple, check boxes that we are, recommending that you do. Take a temperature. If I'm not asking you to come and fill out a temperature sheet and tell me what exactly the temperature was. What I'm saying is, as you as parents and as the players taking on some responsibility on your own, making sure that if you do have symptoms, you don't come. Making sure that, if the temperature is over 100, degrees, we don't come. It's stuff that's very accessible by the CDC, but also, if we have everybody in our program, really buying in and doing these precautions, I really do think this is going to be a sustaining thing that will last for the rest of the season, that we can keep everybody safe. The next part is, if a player does contract COVID-19, and, I say this wholeheartedly, I truly hope this does not end up being the case. We will obviously require a doctor's note of a safe to return to play, policy, just like a normal high school would, anything like that. As that situation, becomes a little bit clearer at the forefront, the CDC is providing guidelines on what that will be. That is probably the number one place that we will be updating this document is in youth sports. When there is a contraction of COVID-19, what the guidelines are. Everybody has kind of their own opinions on it. We will, follow the CDC guidelines, and that will be out in the very near future. So we'll be able to use that document as a resource for us. All payments to our program will be cashless unless a financial obligation arises or cash absolutely must be used. What I'm saying is if you can, write a check, that's great. We allow everything to be done online. We will be talking about payments in a little bit at the end of the presentation, but I will say, I do ask that if you can make a payment online, just do it online. It obviously speeds the process up, as well as we don't have to worry about cash or checks being handed to coaches, trying to negate, as much of the handling of anything that we possibly can. As mentioned, we talked about this earlier as well, baseball itself and our program is completely voluntary. If anybody on this call or anybody who, plays in our program is not comfortable participating after we go through the rules and guidelines, or when you see, hey, I'm not sure of how I feel about this. If this is something that's, not for you, I'm hoping our plan is in place to keep everybody safe and healthy. At the same point, if you do feel that, you're not in a position to be safe, or you don't, want to play, I ask that you just contact me and we can handle that on a one-on-one basis. Again, if there's an event that you don't feel comfortable attending to, I do ask that there is some notice though that you can give us. If somebody says, I don't mind playing in Pennsylvania, I'm a little weary of going outside state lines and going to Maryland or whatnot. If that is the case, I just ask that, our program is notified, not, the night before and at, 9 p.m. we're being told, hey, I didn't feel like going to, New Jersey tomorrow. I feel like that's something that is a decision that's made earlier than just, 3 hours or, 12 hours before the first game. So, I absolutely do ask that is something that we are talking about, in advance. That, again, not saying, somebody may feel uncomfortable, no problem. I just ask that we have some notification on that. So my next kind of concept is going to be talking about voluntary spring training camps. So the way our program is going to start is we're not going to start with quote unquote practices. We're going to start this upcoming week with voluntary spring training camps. So per Tom Wolf's update, organized sports such as Little League are allowed only in counties in the green phase. Organized, and which we answer the question, essentially means practices, physical activity directed by adult or youth leaders that involves rules and formal practice and competition. This includes school and club sports, as well as youth and adult formal activities. So for all the parents who have been texting me and saying, I don't think it's right because Jim's team in Downingtown is in the yellow and they're practicing on the field. All I would say is if they're running a voluntary camp, they are allowed to do that, which we are going to be starting next week. If they're running full-fledged practice in small groups and you're doing physical activity directed by adults with rules and formal practice and competition, that would be negated out of what is not allowed right now. So we will be starting with voluntary spring training camps, and we're going to follow exactly what it says here. Physical activity can be conducted as part of summer programming. It is allowed in the yellow phase, and obviously activities with little or no contact are encouraged. So we are going to start next week with voluntary spring training camps. We're going to follow the recommendations that we are allowed. We're going to talk about the way that these are going to be set up. This is not going to be a normal practice where you would show up and you get the feel that we're going to do 4 or 5 different things. What it's going to be is anybody can show up, and you're going to have a certain age group, which we'll talk about. And when you come to the field, we'll stretch and throw just like a normal camp. We'll do infield, outfield as a team, and we're going to do live BP on the field. It's not going to be set up in any way of, a practice plan where we do base running and then we do rundowns. There's going to be no bunt defense or anything like that until we are in the green. So what we are allowed to do is like a camp atmosphere. We can do some live BP on the field, spread guys out, 1 guy each position. Anybody can go, to a position, but it's not going to be 6 guys in the outfield cluttered together. It's going to be guys at positions, 2 guys hitting, 1 guy hitting, 1 guy on deck. And that's how it's going to kind of work out, where we can maintain under the restrictions that we are provided in Lehigh and Northampton County. However, we are able to get on the field. And, to me, that's a win for us that we can follow the guidelines, but also get the players on the field. Practices will then begin when we're in the green phase. As a program, though, we have set up certain guidelines and recommendations that we felt, made some sense to where we are as a program to make sure that, again, we are keeping everybody safe and effective and healthy. So we will not, last year, for those who came to our Notre Dame practices, we had 5 teams at one time. We had, guys during bullpens at, 5 different mounds. We had, live infield, outfield with, 4 teams. We had fungos going, outfielders, 2 fungos to outfielders, 2 fungos to infielders. We're not going to do that this year. I did enjoy it last year, being able to see everybody for a longer period of time. However, we're not going to exceed 2 total teams at one time on the field, which will never exceed 25 players. Even though that this yellow phase to green does allow for more than 25, I felt like for us, this gives us a chance to keep groups small. With the ability, though, obviously we have some teams that have players from more than just 15 or 20 minutes away who may not be able to make all the practices. So rather than getting stuck with, 6 kids at a practice, we are going to have, sometimes have 2 teams together at one time. But again, never exceeding 25, and really just keeping this at the forefront where we're able to keep this gap that we're going to, in the second bullet point, is not having, practice 5 to 7. The next group is 6:30 to 8:30, like we've had in the past, where we've had an overlap. And then, now you have essentially 2 or 3 or 4 teams at the field at the same time. So not only are we not going to overlap, but we're also going to have a gap in between any practices. So if your team is practicing, say, 5 to 6:30, the next practice session will start 7 to 8:30. And what we're asking is that group from 7 to 8:30, please allow the group from the first session to get finished with practice in their cars, and then the next group can come. So we're giving that space, not for everybody just to go and congregate, 3 feet outside the dugout and watch their team and talk to the guys. It's meant so that, everybody can stay safe. Let those guys come out. Our staff then can sanitize. If it's, our coaches, just making sure that, have hand sanitizer on them. If it's just making sure that all of the practice equipment, nothing is left behind where somebody else now can grab it. All of that stuff, and the gap allows that. So obviously we will split into specific areas before practice, where we can leave, players can leave their equipment. What I don't want is, the classic show up to the field. Everybody has the bat bag or whatever that clips on the cage. We have 7, right next to each other. It's not what we're going to look for. We're probably going to use some of the dugout while also, using some of the outside of the dugout, whether it's behind the dugout, whether it's, down the line, out of play, things like that. But what we will not do is have equipment right on top of each other. People just throwing their stuff down. The players are going to be asked, as we go through this, just if you go in your bag to grab, your helmet, put your glove back, by your bag. And then when you get done hitting, put your helmet back by your bag, grab your glove and go out in the field. Like, to me, this is not something that's, complete rocket science. At the same point, though, it is going to be, a focus of our coaches as we really get into these practices, just to make sure that this helps us, remain socially distant, even if it means we're practicing. So parents are going to be recommended to stay in their cars during practice sessions just to limit the number of people in this one area. Certainly, if a parent needs to stay on site for a medical reason, somebody has an issue that non-COVID related, whether it's diabetes or, anything that they need a parent to kind of stay, all I ask is that you do stay distant, not staying, right next to the fence. And, as our coaches are partaking in worrying about, not only coaching now, but, some of these rules and regulations, but we're trying to limit distractions just to make sure we have the focus, as well as we just want to remain safe. And then finally, on this topic, when there's a continued part, drills will be held in a socially distancing manner that will keep players spread out. Again, this will probably eliminate a lot of the small groups for the immediate future. Once we have this CDC guidance on what they think, is allowed, not allowed for, especially, the contraction of coronavirus, we will maybe, go back to some of these. But, a lot of the practice sessions are going to be held in more of an open setting, where we can use the whole field, outfielders not having 5 outfielders in line right next to each other, spreading them out and being able to do drills kind of together. Final part of the practice session is obviously we're going to limit practices to only being held outside for the immediate future. We're not going to go inside for practices for rain dates through the summer. So, one of the goals of St. Luke's that we were really excited about this year was the opportunity that we did have an indoor venue, if it would rain, spring, summer, fall, that we would be able to use. At this point, I don't see, especially with the guidelines that they're getting, we probably and most likely wouldn't even be able to have a full team in the facility at one given time. So just hearing, some of the recommendations that we've read, we just didn't see the need to put anybody at risk and hold indoor practices right now. Again, as this, is a fluid situation and some regulations come down, I think it's something that we may be able to do in the future, but in the immediate future, we will not be inside. When using fields with closed dugouts, meaning a dugout that only has one opening, one entrance, and the same exit, we will not have any players or equipment be placed in those dugouts for the foreseeable future, meaning at practices or camps, fields like Northwest Little League, Northwest Little League, it's a closed dugout on one side, and then it has opening on one other side where everybody would go in and go out. For that site, we would not be using those dugouts. Dugouts that are open, though, meaning you can walk through them, Notre Dame High School, for those who have been there, openings on both sides, we will use those, but again, stay socially distancing as we go through that process. I think at this point, just again, to me, closed dugout provides us the opportunity where we have to end up being in close quarters, whether somebody's coming in, somebody's coming out. This is just a way, for me to sit there and say, hey, this is an opportunity that could put somebody at risk. So let's negate it right away and just keep, those dugouts, off limits if we have to be at a field like that. Players must not congregate on practice fields before we begin practice. In many of our practices, players will go on the field, whether they play pepper, whether they just start throwing around. What I'm asking is let's at least stay in the cars until coach gets there. And then when the coach gets there, we can all get out. We can all put our equipment down at the same time. Everybody can remain socially distant. We can grab baseballs from the coach. He'll throw them out. We have a plan for all that. Obviously, there is going to be the touching of throwing a ball back and forth. Anybody who played at PBR over the last 3 days obviously has seen, baseball is baseball when you get back on the field. And I do think that's, what everybody's going to see. At the same point, though, these are just some of the ways that, to me, just make some sense that, we can remain kind of safe by doing this stuff. Obviously, I'm encouraging everybody to use the bathroom beforehand. I did put this in there because I do think it's important. The practice fields we use, we're not Diamond Nation where we own the facility and I have a full staff who's going to be, cleaning the bathroom every hour or something like that. We're going to community practice sites. And I can't make it the responsibility of our coaches then to walk in a porta potty and clean the porta potty after everybody gets out while trying to coach baseball. So obviously, you know, that's going to be used at everybody's risk. I would just say, let's just take consideration, not telling anybody what to do at this point of you know, how their bathroom breaks need to be, but just saying, you know, I would recommend, you know, looking into this, doing, you know, beforehand rather than, you know, when you get to the field, because, you know, I don't know what that's going to look like. I would assume they would be open, but I can't even guarantee you that some of these fields will even open their bathrooms if they feel like that's a, you know, a risk to them. We do obviously recommend that all players have a bottle of hand sanitizer in their possession for all Rising Stars events. You know, I would say this, if you follow the CDC, they're recommending anything with over 60% alcohol in the hand sanitizers because they do the best job. You know, I just went through a training on hand sanitizer, if you can believe it, just to make sure that we're keeping up with everything that we need. And, you know, I learned a lot, but, you know, I would say we're just following the basic, you know, CDC rules. Over 60% alcohol is the best. Keep it in. I would say that every player should have a bottle of hand sanitizer in their bag at all times on them. Our coaches will have some, but again, we want to stay away from the sharing as much as possible. So, you know, get a 2 or 4 ounce bottle of hand sanitizer, throw it in the kid's bag, just like you would with, you know, his cleats, and we should be good for the rest of the year. This season, practices are purely voluntary. You know, I'm recommending, and this is coming from me, and I use we because I do think our program is a bunch of, you know, of we, but for this one, you know, this is coming straight from the horse's mouth. I absolutely recommend anybody that stays away from practice sites due to any sickness or obligation, you know, due to pandemic of COVID-19. What I mean is, you know, I think that, you know, COVID-19 has changed the way that many people are living their lives, not just on a health-based, but also on a possible work-based thing. So, you know, we may have, you know, parents or players who, you know, have been out of work, who, you know, at this point need to work, and that might take them away from practice. So I don't want anybody to think that we're going to hold it against them. You know, we have a practice on a Thursday and somebody can't make it because, you know, they were able to get a job to help, you know, make ends meet. And, you know, I'm not going to take that away from them, especially with where we're at, you know, right now in life. So, you know, I truly recommend we stay away from the practice sites, you know, if of any sickness, you know, because in reality, I don't want anybody to go through not feeling well and then have to go through the testing and then waiting days. And you know, if there is a wait, you know, possibly sitting out during that time. So to me, you know, if it's, you know, stomach bug that has really nothing to do with COVID-19, but you're not feeling good, you know, stay away. If it's something due to, you know, what this pandemic has caused for some of us, I would say stay away. You know, nothing's going to be held against anybody this season. I've always allowed people to play, you know, others, you know, Legion or Connie Mack, you know, we allowed it. You know, at this point, what I'm saying is, you know, I understand if people need to miss due to something going on. You know, if a mom is working extra hours and can't get the kid to practice, you know, it's an email that just says, hey, we got some things going on. You know, to me, this season's going to be a little different, and we completely understand. So tournaments, you know, getting into the, you know, the final stages of the PowerPoint here, obviously we need, as a program, we're going to defer to the host venue as they provide their specific guidelines and recommendations. You know, places that we're going to play, you know, really are going to make up their own rules and regulations. Not saying that they're not, you know, agreeing with a lot of the stuff that we may have in here. However, I do think it needs to be said that, you know, we do need to follow what they're saying. Again, if they say, just like the state of Delaware, that everybody needs to wear a mask when you're in the dugout, you don't have to be 6 feet away from each other, but you have to wear a mask. That's what we have to do. You know, it's a lot of this stuff. It might not be, you know, it might be their rules and regulations. And to me, you know, we're playing in their event and we're going to have to follow those guidelines. My hope is we as a program are provided those guidelines set forth by the venue, and then what we'll do is send that out to the team in advance of the event. So my hope would be we're going to Diamond Nation on, you know, July 15th, and they say, hey, these are our recommendations. I'm sure they're going to be on their website. At the same point, I will send that out to all of you. I would hope that you guys then would take that, go through the policies, make sure that, we're understanding so that we don't get to the field and say, oh my gosh, I had no idea this was going to be the case. I've talked to a lot of people. A lot of tournament venues are closing their cages before games. So, something that has always been done in the past where we just go up to a field, go in the cage, go to hit, that might not be available this year because some township fields are saying, hey, you might be able to play, but we're not going to allow, the batting cage where it's close quarters between two different teams. So again, I think it's really important that we do understand the venue's rules and regulations before we even show up to the tournament. I do ask all coaches, players, and parents to adhere to these policies for the venue. The last thing I want is Diamond Nation to call me or a coach call me and saying, they ask the parents to sit, 6 feet away from each other. And I don't know if that's the case, but, or they asked for, one parent for each player to limit, the amount of people in one area, and a family brought 10 people. To me, I don't think those discussions need to happen. We're trying to remain safe. We're trying to do everything we can to keep the players safe. I think we all just need to buy in a little bit on maybe we don't all agree with what policies are doing, but it's not up to us to whether agree or disagree if we want to play in their events. So, if they recommend or they have some sort of regulation on what entrance to use or what exit to use or what facility, what bathroom, what batting cage, whatever, we do have to understand that we are going to follow what they ask us to do. And then certainly, I honestly hope that this document, does continue to kind of, be used during the tournaments, just because, the tournaments might say, hey, you don't have to bring a mask. They might say something like that. To me, though, I would hope that, our Rising Stars rules and regulations, is being taken consideration. Because again, you never know. It could rain at a site, and now we're playing at a different site that day that may require a mask. A lot of these township fields are taking them solely based on the township themselves. One township may say mask at all times. One may say no mask at all. And they're welcome to do so at this point. So I really do think it's important that, the stuff that's in here, just because we're going to a tournament, doesn't mean that everything else is thrown out the door. It doesn't mean that, it's just a free-for-all when we show up. This document, to me, and I hope so, that it certainly, does move forward through tournament season. And then lastly, this Rising Stars guidelines and recommendations, to me, would supersede any tournament rules that appear to be less safe. Meaning, if you guys see, one of these, venues or facilities send out their rules and regulations, and it's, three bullet points, don't touch each other, don't get sick. I think, we need to understand that our program also does not want to put anybody at risk at playing at a venue that's not meant to our standards. So, and I think this is a communicative method. This isn't just, me saying this. If somebody does go to a venue and they play in a tournament and they're like, you know what, not really sure about that. I would ask that, I am communicated with. If somebody, I'm just going to use that as an example. Somebody goes to Big Vision, or, they change the name now. But so Big Vision, which is now something sports, but they can't play in Berks County. So their fields are all shut down. So they moved all of their tournaments to York. So if anybody's going to Big Vision and now they have to go to York, and somebody says, you know what, I was used to the Big Vision complex, it seemed to be safe every time I was there. This York complex, I saw the rules and regulations they put out there. I don't really feel comfortable, or I don't think we should go back. It really, it didn't get the vibe that I felt, everybody was safe and whatnot. I would like to be communicated with so that, we can then make the recommendations and move forward doing everything the right way. So I think everybody's favorite part, and certainly mine, is when we are going to be able to get on the field. So, we're going to start with these voluntary Rising Stars spring training camps. They're going to be open. They're going to start next week. We are able to use Northwest Little League. They're a private organization, and they're permitting teams to be on the field. However, every player must have a Northwest Little League signed waiver form, which is going to be sent out immediately following this email, and it needs to be back to me by tomorrow night at 11:59. We are going to, on Friday, bring a stack of waiver forms to the president of Northwest Little League. And at that point, anyone who is in there is eligible to practice on the field starting on Monday. If you're not in there, meaning if I don't have a signed waiver form by tomorrow night where I can print it off my computer and hand it to the president of Northwest, you cannot practice on their field. It's not a question, oh, I'll bring it to the field. He's not on site when we're going to be there, so he needs that copy before you would be there. The times that we have for these camps are not, ideal practice times. It's again, voluntary camp times. They're not allowing us to set up times until we have all the waiver forms handed in. So the goal is we have these done 11:59 on Thursday, printed out on Friday, handed in on Friday, and then on Friday, we're able to set times for the following week. However, we were able to kind of talk this through with them and see, what would be available. What they do have available is Tuesday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. So what we will do is once we have all these waiver forms in, we will be offering times out per team that just says, hey guys, on Tuesday at from 10 to 11:30 or 10 to 12, we have a voluntary camp for the 16U team or the 15U team, and anybody who's around is able to come. We'd love to have you. We will have coaches there. Again, it's going to be very open. It's going to be, throwing, stretching, live BP, and infield, outfield. That's going to be our camp strategy. Again, it's not going to be the teachings of a bunt defense or rundowns or pickoffs, first and third offense, first and third defense. It's going to be open as kind of a welcome back spring training area. We then will be getting into the practice session on June 29th, and this is solely based on the knowledge that I've been told that we are going to be green on June 26th. So Lower Nazareth, unlike Northwest Little League, is not allowing permits, meaning they will give me a field permit that I can bring to my insurance until we're in the green. They are saying practice at your own risk, but there's no insurance. Our insurance will not cover a field if we're not permitted to be there. So if we have to wait until we are in the green, and this is most fields, this is most township fields, not just Lower Nazareth. So this is a situation where when we expect to be green, we then have Lower Nazareth. Once we hit July and Notre Dame has their plan that everybody saw when the PIAA came out, nobody in the PIAA can do anything on their fields until they physically create a plan and send it to the state to show them their plan, and it has to be accepted then. So, that's probably why you haven't seen, some football teams have not been out, even though the PIAA said you can be out. If they didn't get their plan to the state, they can't just walk on the field. Most of the high school programs that I talk to are targeting July 6th, meaning that's when I would assume that we would be able to have the conversation with Notre Dame after they hand their plan in and have teams on the field. Then they're going to come to an outside organization such as us and say, hey, you guys have the field. So I would say within this next, 2 or 3 week period, as we get, some ability to get these fields, that's when we're going to, begin getting on them. So event start dates, each team is going to receive, some already have, are going to receive a message through me, through GroupMe. Rather than do these Zooms and try to get everybody on the same page, I think the GroupMe is plenty good, especially because it can be, answered at any time. It's convenient for all of you and me. So, it does look like in Pennsylvania, we would be able to start at least July 4th weekend. And and hopefully with everything looks like, that will be green on June 16th or June 26th, that we would be able to play, the weekend of June 27th, 28th. So you will get some text from me that just says, and again, most of you probably already have, would your team be able and willing to play on July 4th weekend? And to me, I want to get the players on the field. I don't want to do it. We're not gonna go under yellow that we are right now. We're not this weekend going to Ohio to play. We're very close to this reopen. I really hope that by next weekend we do see tournament venues, and Pennsylvania tournament venues are planning on playing next weekend. If they get this green light, that what the assumption is on Friday, Governor Wolf is going to announce that the following Friday, June 26th, the Lehigh County, Northampton County, and then, that Philadelphia area are green, which would, basically bring the whole state to green. Secondly, all teams are going to receive the number of events that you were scheduled to play before coronavirus, the outbreak happened. So everybody was provided a schedule. They're on our website. At the same point, though, and I've talked about this with each individual group, we're not going to have a split that we've always had. We've always had a split, which was spring, summer, essentially for the teams under the high school age. They started in the spring, March, mid-March was practices. April was tournaments, May was tournaments, and then everybody played in June. Then we would have, some of August off and then start this spring season some point in late August or early September. We're not doing that this year, which, I've had, numerous conversations with everybody on. This is going to be one season, meaning the team, we're not going to have, evaluations in July like we normally do, and we're adding guys or taking guys away. This is going to be one season. No uniforms are going to change. No hats are going to change. Obviously no pants that you guys get. Nothing's going to change. So it's just going to roll in as one season. However, especially for the high school teams, I would hope as you hear this, you're looking at your schedule saying, well, if it's one season and we're starting possibly July 4th weekend, or earlier, and Dan wants to play up until October 18th, which is we'll talk about in a second, how are we going to only play 6 events or 7 events in 16 weekends? So, of course, what my goal is that we're going to provide the events that everybody paid for. The first and foremost, if in the summer, especially June that we missed, if you were supposed to play at, Diamond Nation, ECTB, and MSI, those tournaments are now just going to be moved to either an off weekend in July from your schedule or in August. And then we're still going to play through October 18th. So we do have the opportunity then to add events. I don't think that, anybody wants to play 6 events in 16 weekends if you really want to play travel baseball. So all we're going to do is handle those on a team-by-team basis. We're going to give the schedule of what we are, providing, and then we're going to have the conversation, do we want to add 3-4 tournaments, so then we can spread out maybe 10 or 11 tournaments, however we want to make this work over the course of these 16 weekends. I do have a hard stop, though, on October 18th. And I put this in there, and I want everybody to understand my reasoning behind it. My goal is to leave the October 24th, 25th weekend, typically a weekend that we would play and end our season. I try to end our season before Halloween weekend. And however, I want to leave that weekend open with respect to obviously rain, because as we, enter all of these tournaments, I do think that it's necessary that we do have some options. And if for some reason we would get pushed back, Diamond Nation was supposed to run tournaments on June 22nd, and today it came out that they're going to run tournaments on July 6th. So there is that small concession in my mind of, as we get closer and we're geared up to July 4th or, whatever date that we're going to start, what happens if we do get pushed back? And what I don't want to do is schedule all of these events throughout the fall, and now we run into a situation where now we have credits, or we don't have enough weekends to play all these events, or we're playing in 7 straight weekends because we had to throw everything here at the end because we didn't plan for anything. And finally, all I've heard is about this potential of this reoccurrence of COVID-19, and certainly what I don't want to do is put us out too late into October and even into November, where a lot of teams are considering playing into, that first or second weekend of November. And we have to be one of those programs where now, we had schedules out and now we're kind of stuck because they're taking us again off the field. And again, I think this is a fluid situation, but at the same point, I certainly want to make sure that we are out looking ahead of making sure that we're not pushing too much late. And then, all of you are now, paying for something that may not even be possible because, we may not be able to be on the field that late, and as close as we get. So, to me, I just thought it was really important that we do have a reason, though, of why I didn't want anybody to look at the schedule and say, hey, October 18th is just too early. I don't know what your reasoning is. I try to be transparent with everybody. So I touched base on this a little bit before. We will be requesting waiver forms from our program. It's going to be, signed by before any player touches a camp, a practice, or a game. It's gonna, basically say that we've seen, the presentation, we have the physical copy, we understand where we're at, and we do understand that there are obviously some challenges here. And we're going to do, everything that we can to abide by these rules and regulations laid out, and we understand them. I hope I didn't say anything in this presentation that anybody would take in and say, hey, I don't understand, what does he mean by no sunflower seeds, or, no spitting, or no handshakes and stuff like that. All that stuff to me, is pretty black and white, which I think just helps us remain safe. The second part is, I highly expect, without playing in a tournament yet, but I highly expect every tournament venue, practice site, or camp field is going to require their own waiver forms. So what I'm asking is, unlike normal where ECTB, we show up to the field, some guy comes around, hey, sign your name, fill out the box. What I'm asking is, as we get this stuff in, that we do make it a priority, though, that it is completed. I don't want our coaches, who are going to have a lot more to worry about, rather than just baseball right now, showing up to a venue and then having to worry about finding all of you to get, boxes signed that say you understand all this stuff. If it's something that we get in advance, which I would hope that, it would be, that we can present it to you guys, hopefully early in the week, say, hey, if it's electronic, great. I would imagine most would be. Obviously, for some of the venues we go to, it's probably not, capable of that way. So if it's something that needs to be printed out and signed, all we ask, rather than collecting them, at 8 o'clock or 7 a.m. when we get to a field and we're trying to figure out what we can and can't do, I think, let's bring them to a practice, the practice before the, the tournament. Let's bring them there, all hand them to coach. Coach then can hand them in at one time. We're not worrying about collecting everything. I obviously foresee this being something that's going to happen not only, through the summer, but probably through the fall as well. So I just ask that everybody kind of, remains on top of this stuff so that, it's not putting anybody in a hard situation. I did touch base about this part a little earlier. Obviously, once the breakout of COVID-19 hit, we did have some parents who were on payment plans who had made some requests about, can we, basically stop paying at this point. And certainly at that time, I said, I don't foresee us having expenses coming up, as no one really had any expectations or knowledge of what was happening or when we were going to be on the field or whatnot. At the same point, though, we now are in the position where, as we are get back on the field, we do have expenses that need to be paid. So what I'm asking is, I think, I try to do my best with everyone who did request, an extension or has been on an extension through our program, that we do understand that this needs to be at the forefront. And I can't say it any clearer. This absolutely needs to be, on everybody's mind, that, our travel expenses have only gone up, and I know it sounds ridiculous, but buying hand sanitizer at this time and finding hand sanitizer for all of our coaches, and the amount of work that we've put in to making sure that we can lay out this program tonight and doing enough sessions beforehand to get the right knowledge, there have been expenses that come with that. There's going to be things that we need to do on the back end to make sure that we are providing, the safest atmosphere for everybody. So, and that comes with expenses. So I just, I'm trying to lay it out there as nicely as possible. But at the same point, I do ask that, this is taken care of, because I definitely don't want a team to be held back because half the team, hasn't made a payment, or we have, one team that owes a ton of money, and not to, hold it over anybody's head, but I certainly have held teams out because their teams weren't paying. And you can certainly ask some teams in our program that were supposed to go to certain venues last year. To me, if the team, as a group is really not getting behind making those payments, I don't think it's fair for the program to do so either. So, I do ask if anybody does owe, and if anybody has any questions on that and they're like, hey, I'm not sure where I stand, certainly email me. You will have the electronic invoices that we use through Square. They've been working really well. Obviously, we're trying to remain cashless. So I certainly do hope that doesn't, hold us back from where we want to go. And finally, I do think everybody kind of on this call deserves to be thanked because, without having people in place that really care enough about the program, or really care enough about the players, or even, us. It takes patience, certainly. And I did put in there, I mean, we've been reached out to by many programs about sharing our plan because they didn't have the means, or they didn't really care enough to do so. And some people are going to jump on the field. They're going to say, hey, be safe, follow the CDC, and that's great. For me, that's not good enough, because I can't go to sleep at night knowing that I didn't do everything I possibly could to keep everyone safe. And to me, when we're talking about kids and we're talking about families, and me being a director, I feel like it is my job to host nights like this and put policies and regulations in place to make sure that we can do everything we possibly can. But I'm very grateful that, it's been very well supported. I've had a couple parents reach out and certainly be excited to get back on the field, but it has always been done respectfully. And that's all I can ask is that, we don't have to agree on everything. And certainly during this time of where we stand in the world, I see a lot of disagreement, but at the same point, I do see that, things can be done respectfully. And that's certainly all I can ask. I do appreciate that. And then, I put the two words on there. I didn't know how in May, or really in March, when we were going to ever be able to say play ball. But I'm ecstatic that we can say that we will be on the field next week. I'm ecstatic to know that the nice white jerseys that I was all excited about to see on the field are going to be on the field very soon. And I'm really looking forward to a really good season. And I appreciate all the support that we've gotten, numerous text messages, and parents just, putting time and effort into helping us in any way. And I truly do appreciate it. So you will be getting those schedules. Before we do anything, though, you're going to get this waiver form from Northwest, because even, you'll get my waiver form before practice, or before our camp start on Tuesday, but they need that for us to even make the schedule. So everybody will be getting that tonight. I ask again, please get it to me. All you have to do is print it off, sign it, fill it out, scan it. You can take a picture on your phone and send it to me. I will print all of these out. I'm going to go down and hand them in per team, and then we can get moving with a schedule and get on the field. So, thanks for everybody attending tonight. Again, all of the stuff is going to be made very clear to everybody. I do hope that we are understanding, that the program is trying to do everything we can for everybody in it. If there's any questions on the plan, if there's any questions on playing, or anything that anybody foresees or would like to go over, I would absolutely, have no problem speaking with you, or talking to you, or talking through it. And it's certainly, it doesn't mean that everything in this plan is the end all be all. I would love to add a few things here and there, as we see fit. So again, thank you guys for attending. I'm going to